Hello everyone, Lance here. The last character modeling series was a very long time ago. It was 4 years to be precise. Back then it was the beta version of Blender 2.8 and there were a lot of bugs back then, so I had to work around the bugs. So yeah, the series weren't that very good. In any case, we are now at Blender 4.0, so it's high time I make another character modeling series. And also, it's been a long time since I made a character, so now it's a good opportunity for me to practice more on character modeling so that my skills don't rust too much. And similar to the last character modeling series, this series will also be sped up by 4 times. So if you want to see the actions in real time, you can slow down the playback to 25%. Okay, with no further ado, let's get started. As usual, I started with the sphere and sculpted the sphere into the overall shape of the head. And once I had the head, I sculpted the overall features of the face, like the eye sockets, the nose, and the jaw. At this point, I did not really care about whether or not I made things correctly, because I can always come back to correct things later on. So as you can see, the face looked very ugly at this point. It looked like a bunch of dirt put together into something that resembled a human head, but it really didn't matter that much, because I just need the features to be there first, and then I can come back to move the features around and tweak them into the correct shape. And at this early stage, there is one particular technique that I used over and over again. And that is, when I sculpt something, I just sculpt it into a very rough shape, and then I use the smooth brush to smooth it out, and then I sculpt the details back on. For example, in this video, when I made the mouth, as you can see, I made a very rough looking mouth with all the bumpiness and the roughness of the low resolution mesh. And then I used the smooth brush to remove all the details along with the bumpiness of the rough mesh. Basically, the smooth brush removed the errors along with the details. Throughout this video, I used this technique over and over again, especially on the mouth. You will see that I blurred out the mouth over and over again, only to then sculpt the details back on. And every time I did that, the mouth became a little bit better. However, this is actually just a technique, and in order to make a correct looking mouth, you gotta know how to make a correct looking mouth in the first place. So if you don't know the anatomy of the mouth, it doesn't matter how many times you use this technique, you will always end up with an ugly mouth. So if you look at the taskbar below, you can see that I had an app open on the far right. That one is Human Anatomy Atlas. I bought this app a while ago on Windows Store, and I had it opened on another monitor so that I can reference the anatomy whenever I need. To make the ears, I used the snake hook brush to pull out some geometry, and then I sculpted it into a rough ear shape. Basically, I'm using the same technique that I talked about before to make the ears. It's the same technique, but different geometry. I mean, different shape. So you see here I have just smoothed out the ears and then sculpted the details back on, and as you can see, the ears became a lot better. But it's not there yet, so over the course of this series I did this a few more times on the ears to make it look perfect. And again, as you can see, I am using the same technique on the eyelids. I just smooth it out and then sculpt some more details on. And after a few times, the eyelids became perfectly smooth. And this is the part where I started to make the body. As usual, I used the snake hook brush to pull out some geometry and sculpted the geometry into a rough body shape. As usual, I don't really care whether or not these are correct because I can always come back here later and sculpt them into proper shape. The breasts are a little bit distracting because it covered the chest muscles underneath, and at this point the body is still in a very rough shape, so I decided to get rid of the breasts for now so that I can focus on sculpting the correct anatomy before adding the breasts later on. As I mentioned before, I did have an anatomy app opened on another monitor so that I can look over every time I need to remind myself about a certain part of the body. Even though I did memorize quite a bit of human anatomy, I don't really trust my memory that much because at the end of the day, the brain is not perfect and there are always parts that I remember wrong. So even though I memorized the human anatomy, I still had my reference nearby so that I can look over whenever I need. this point I was quite happy with the body, so I decided that it was time to add the breasts. At this point, I was quite happy with how the body looked, so I decided to call it a day. And there were still parts that need tweaking, but the character is gonna be clothed anyway, so the errors are not gonna be visible in the end, so it didn't matter that much. And the next step of the series is to retopologize the character, and that is the subject of the next video. I'll see you next time.